Hello and welcome to What's the Story? We're an inquisitive bunch of hosts from the What's the Story team on a mission to uncover stories about faith and courage from everyday people. And to help us do just that, we get the privilege to chat with amazing guests and delve into their faith journey, the hurdles they've overcome, and the life lessons they have learned along the way. Now, if you enjoy our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter on our website, which is whatsthestorypodcast.com. It's your direct line to the latest episodes and detailed show notes, and they all get delivered straight to your inbox. And the best part, it's absolutely free. What's the Story is brought to you by Crowd Church. We understand that stepping into a traditional church might not be everybody's cup of tea. And that's where Crowd Church steps in, providing a digital sanctuary, a safe space to explore the Christian faith where you can engage in meaningful conversations rather than just simply spectating. So whether you are new to the Christian faith or are in search of a new church family, we invite you to visit us at www.crowd.church. And if you've got any questions, just drop us an email at hello@crowd.church. We're here to help and would genuinely love to connect with you. And now, without further ado, let's meet your host and our very special guest for today.
Hello and welcome to What's the Story? My name is Anna. I'm part of the Crowd Church team here. I'm your host for this episode of What's the Story podcast. And today I'm joined by my good friend Mike Harris. Now, Mike is a PE teacher from Liverpool, and he's also an ex-professional footballer who's played for a number of different teams, including Blackburn and also Newcastle United. He's married to Debbie and dad's two wonderful kids. Now, Mike and I have been friends for, I was trying to work it out earlier today, but certainly over 20 years now. And in fact, we first met at Christian Gap Year that we both did here in Liverpool in 2001, 2002. So we've known each other for a good few years. And incidentally, that was also the year where he first met his wife, Debbie. So it was quite an important year all in your life, wasn't it, Mike? Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you on the show. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I guess we should start at the beginning, really, shouldn't we? And find out a little bit more about you, Mike. So obviously, you grew up in a Christian family. You came from quite a religious background in many ways. But I guess I'm kind of interested in when it really started to mean something for you personally. Like, when did you kind of find a faith that was personal to you? Can you tell us a bit more about that kind of journey, sort of through your childhood and into Christianity? Really?
So I was one of 5 children and I grew up in a Christian family. We were all quite close in age. There was 5 of us under the age of 4 at one point.
Which, being a parent now, you're like, how did your mum and dad ever do that?
How did they do that? Respect to them. I mean, I never needed any friends growing up, which was a nice thing because I had enough of them at home.
Yeah.
And so that was good. So I had 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and sport was a big part of my life, as well as going to church. So we went to church 3 times every Sunday. And I'd also go to a youth group during the week at church. And then I'd play a lot of sport, and in particular football. And so when I was 12, really, I mean, I played football all the time, but when I was 12, I was playing for my secondary school, and my dad, like any dad, thought that their son was really good at football. The difference was that my dad had a cousin who was a coach of Blackburn Rovers, and so he invited him along to come and watch me play. He thought that I was good as well. So then I went up to Blackburn for a trial, and I ended up staying there for 4 years. So I was there till I was 16, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, I loved football. I loved playing sport. I loved the affirmation that I got from it because I was good at it as well. And all of that was very good. And then when I was 16, my coach at the time, who was a guy called Alan Irvine, he left and went to Newcastle with Kenny Dalglish, who was the manager of Blackburn, and I went with him to Newcastle. So at the age of 16, I left home, went to Newcastle, signed as a YPS, and then signed as a professional. And I was there for a few years. I didn't really go to church whilst I was there. I to go to church when I was at home, but because I'd left home, my mum and dad said, it's up to you. And they did have a friend in Newcastle who they used to send to the hotel, because we lived in a hotel at the time. And they used to send this friend, Nick, to the hotel. And every time he used to come, I used to hide. And I used to tell the manager of the hotel, just tell him I'm not here, because for me, Christianity, I heard this said on the off course, but for me, Christianity was boring. It was irrelevant to my life. I was going to be a professional footballer. I was a professional footballer, so it was irrelevant. And I don't think I would say that I felt like it was untrue, but I definitely didn't know. So it was boring, it was irrelevant, and I didn't know if it was true.
And it certainly wasn't top of your agenda when you're leaving home at 16 and living that footballer lifestyle for the first time. You got the first taste of freedom, I'm guessing. Probably not the first thing you think, I need to go and find a good church.
Absolutely. And I just didn't feel like I needed it. I had everything that I'd always wanted. So that was Newcastle. But obviously Newcastle didn't, I'm not currently a Premiership footballer, so Newcastle didn't work out. I was a professional footballer there, which was great. But unfortunately, after a few years, my contract came to an end and I hadn't made it into the first team. By this time, Ken Dalglish had been fired. Ruud Hullet came in as the manager. After the year, Ruud Hullet got fired and Bobby Robson became the manager. I hadn't made it into the first team, and so Bobby Robson decided that he wasn't going to give me another contract. I then went on trial to lots of different clubs, and I went on trial to loads and loads of different clubs over a number of years. Some clubs I spent longer at than others, but I wasn't able to really find a club that was prepared to give me a long-term contract. And I ended up at a club called Chester City. And it was whilst I was there that I became a Christian. And I wish I could remember more about the actual how it happened, but a few things that happened. So one of the things that happened was I remember having a conversation with my mum, and she'd just come back from a Christian camp called MCYT Christian Camps, which lots of people within Liverpool have been to. And she was just talking to me about how amazing it was and how what a great time she'd had. And I just remember thinking that she had peace and a joy that I didn't. And also she had a peace and a joy that I hadn't seen in any of my heroes that I'd spent a lot of time with. And I knew because I've been brought up as a Christian, although it wasn't real to me, I knew that at that moment that the reason why my mum was like that was because she had a faith and because her faith was in Jesus Christ. So that was one thing that I remember being a defining moment. But there were others. So I remember when I was at Newcastle, I bought a brand new car. Me and my two roommates had been out, and we decided to buy three of the same car. I think we thought we'd get like three for the price of two or something like that. But But what actually happened was that they just charged far more than they would have charged any other normal person.
They just saw three naive young footballers coming through the showroom,
Absolutely.
I guess.
And I remember, the registration. I remember the registration number. So I got a blue one. It was a Vauxhall Tigra. So I got a blue one. My mate got a grey one, and my other mate got a black one, and we all parked them next to each other in our triple garage that we had. And my registration was V293 FBN, and my other mates was V294 FBN and V295 FBN. But it's funny that you remember that, isn't it? But anyway, about 3 weeks after buying this car, I was travelling back up to Newcastle, and I had my mate in the car, who'd also come from Blackburn to Newcastle with me. And we had some Coronation chicken in the Tupperware box on the back seat. And as we were travelling back up to Newcastle, we actually got back up to Newcastle. We were in Durham. And I was travelling on an A road, and I clipped the curb at the central reservation and sent the car across the A road, and we hit a tree at 70 miles an hour head on. Fortunately, cut a long story short, I was fine and my mate was fine. Coronation chicken wasn't. Not
so much.
But I remember thinking, at the time, I don't know what would have happened to me had I died. Most people who hit a tree at 70 mile an hour die. And I didn't. I was spared for whatever reason. And I remember thinking, I don't know where I'd have gone. I was brought up a Christian. I was brought up to believe in heaven, and I was brought up to believe in hell. And I remember feeling anxious, at least, about the fact that I didn't know where I'd gone had I been killed in that crash. And so I think those two things were two of the catalysts for me making a decision that eventually, so that the car crash came first, and then the conversation with my mum came later on, that I wanted to become a Christian. I can't remember exactly when it happened, but I do remember whilst I was at Chester, and at time after I'd spoken to my mum, I remember opening up the Bible, which wasn't the first time because I'd spent a long time in church. I just remember opening up the Bible, and for the first time ever, it felt like God was speaking to me. It felt like the book was alive. It felt like, it felt powerful. It felt like nothing I'd ever read before. It felt amazing. And so it was then that I decided that I wanted to be a Christian. I wanted to follow Jesus. I wanted to be his disciple. I had wasted all of my money. So I had £3,500 left. And so I decided that I wanted to do a year out. And I looked all over the world, literally all over the world, for somewhere to go to do a year out, a Christian year out. And the only one that I could find was 10 minutes down the road in Wavertree, which was the Amiga team that me and you did. And that was, that was another turning point in my life and my relationship with God.
Fab. So obviously there's a lot in that, and there's a lot you've covered, that sort of journey into faith and some of that disappointment that you're working through around kind of your football career not working out quite the way you expected. But I mean, would you say that's a big challenge that you've had to overcome? What's been the hardest thing up to now? Because, a journey of faith is great, but it's not all easy, is it? It's not necessarily an easy life being a Christian. So I'm interested, where did it go from there?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges that I've faced, and I'm still facing, if I'm honest, is just accepting God's unconditional love for me. I have spent most of my life in a very competitive environment. I left home when I was 16, very young, and I was thrust into a very, very competitive situation where, you know, I was faced with the competition of my peers and wanted to do better than them. All of us were focused on being in the first team, and we were competing against, and we were aware that we were competing against each other. So I was dealing with that. I was also dealing with the fact that I'd left home, and that wasn't easy. I didn't have my mum and dad there, although my dad did come an awful lot of time, which was amazing. I didn't have mum and dad there every day to say, you know, keep going. We think you're great. We love you. I also had the pressure, which I felt, which wasn't always real, but I felt like it was real. So I want, you know, I'm a son, so I wanted to please my dad. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to get let go. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be captain of England. And I, you know, so I had that pressure. Alan Irvine had taken a bit of a gamble on me, I suppose, coach, and brought me up to Newcastle, and that, you know, I didn't want to let him down. And that was a pressure, that I felt. You know, I have friends at home, and my peers at home who knew me as Mike, the lad who's a professional footballer. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to come home and say it's not worked out. And so that whole earning and that competition is something that when I became a Christian was difficult to get rid of. And so learning about how much God loves me and that it is unconditional has been a slow process, probably quite frustrating for God. But it has been quite a slow process for me. And, you know, the Amiga team was a massive step in the right direction for me, and learning about God's unconditional love. A huge step. But it's something that, you know, it's still a challenge that I'm battling with. I had lots of expectations that I didn't want to disappoint. I also came from a very accomplished sporting background, you know, in that lots of my family were very, very good at sport. My dad was a basketballer for England, and I have, you know, a sister who represented Great Britain in athletics, a brother who represented Great Britain in athletics, another brother who was second in Europe in gymnastics, you know, so I've got lots of very successful siblings, and I just, you know, it's difficult then once you become a Christian, I found, to then accept that God loves me without me doing anything, without me winning a single medal, you know, without me accomplishing anything. And so I think for me, coming out of that world of sport, that has been one of my biggest challenges and biggest battles.
Sure. And I'm interested, like, because that's obviously huge. And so I suppose I'm interested in, like, how did that theme then continue to unfold in your life from there? So what happened after that?
I mean,
so you came out of that professional football, and
so
what
after,
next?
After the Amiga team, I felt like God was wanting me to go back into football, which at least was interesting for me because, you know, I didn't really still have the same love for football. But that was what I felt like God was asking me to do. And so I went back into football right at a very low level. And I signed up with Untitled Chapter, loved it. Really enjoyed playing there. And then I got a move up a league to Runcorn. And then I got a move up another league, to the RMI. And however, I realized that, you know, by this time I was like 24, 25, and I needed to make a decision really about what was going to be my future. Because, you know, I was wise enough to understand that I wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to make enough money from football for me to be able to do that as my only career. At the time I was a semi-professional footballer. And so it was that point. I was married at the time, and my wife was a teacher. And so, I decided that I was going to be, going to PE teaching. So I did a degree. I managed to get a first, which was, great. Very proud of that because school didn't go very well, or it didn't go great for me because, I felt like I was going to be a professional footballer. So I didn't really have a lot of time to school, but, I managed to get that first in my degree, and I've been a teacher now, a PE teacher, a big Catholic comprehensive, for 14 years. And the way that I feel like, I've grown as a Christian is that, what's interesting is at the moment I'm at a point in my career where, I'm wanting to change, and I'm wanting to make some decisions about, where I go and what I do next. And I'm considering the possibility of maybe stepping back from my role. I'm currently, ahead of PE, and I'm currently thinking about the possibility of me stepping back and maybe taking a less senior position, or even maybe coming out of teaching and doing something, something different. And, I think it's only because I have grown to learn about how much that God loves me that I feel like I could take a step back in my career, which many people would see as maybe me not doing so well. I think because I have grown in my faith and I know more now that God loves me unconditionally, I feel like that is an option. And it's only a small thing, but for me that's quite a big deal. And shows.
Yeah. It's quite cultural, isn't it, actually? It's unusual. Like there's kind of this idea that you should just always be going up another rung on your career and earning more money and more prestige. And, that's kind of how our culture thinks. So that sort of sense of freedom you have, that you can step outside of that, is quite unusual, I think. Like, it's quite a big change from being in that high performance world that you used to be in, where like, actually feel like you've got that freedom to be like, I can explore different things and I can do anything I want, like, with God here. And that's quite incredible, really, isn't it?
One of the interesting things was when I was coming out of football, as I was sort of, I was playing semi-professional football, I met lots of other footballers, who had relatively successful careers, and they were sort of on their way out, if you like. And, you could see that for a lot of people, or a lot of lads who I knew, as a Newcastle professional, people wouldn't recognize me, but people would know that I played for Newcastle, mainly because of the people who I was with at the time. And so I could go to a party, or I could go to a club, or I could go to a bar, and I could walk in and people would know that I played for Newcastle. And so there was quite a lot of kudos, and that, as a young lad, that was massive. And so when I was, a semi-professional footballer, it was very, very different, being at Newcastle and being with other players. And you could see how that was a big struggle for lots of people. They were struggling to come to terms with the fact that they weren't going to be that person. They weren't going to have that same sway and that same power and that same kudos going into those bars. And so a lot of them understandably in one way, would go into drugs and things like that, because that was the only thing that meant you could go into a bar or to a club or to a party and have a similar kudos to the kudos that you got from being a footballer. And so, and that was interesting, for me. It was never a temptation for me. But it was interesting that it's just such a battle for people. to give it up and to be able to, maybe take a step back and accept that, that's the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, your story is really outside of the norm, isn't it? In that sense. And to me, that just speaks of how much work God's done in your life. But I mean, obviously your story's not over yet. You're still thinking about what your next career step is, or what changes might be afoot. So, I'm aware that you're certainly not at the end of your story yet. There's still way more chapters to be written, which is exciting. And, I'm personally excited to see what God does with you next and where he takes you next, if you do something slightly different or step back from teaching a little bit. But I mean, just reflecting up to where you are right now, what do you think you've learned through all of this experience up to date? Like, I know it's a really hard thing to ask, isn't it? But if you could just distill it down to one sort of like lesson in life, what would that thing be? Like, what's that thing that you feel like, this is what I know now that I didn't know before?
I think I've mentioned it before, but I think it would be that God's love for me is unconditional. I've just finished reading a book that talks about the fact that that we have different sort of horizons, and when we know that God has a future for us, and we can have a hope in something that is certain and that is not going to change in the future, then it impacts how we behave and how the level of joy and freedom that we can have in our own lives. And what's been interesting for me is that coming out of football, if the people, pupils ask me, why are you not a footballer anymore? Did you get an injury? And what they want to hear is that I've got an injury. They don't want to hear that no, actually my story is that I wasn't quite good enough. I was good enough to be a professional footballer, and that was fantastic. But my football career didn't come to an end because of an injury. And it's difficult. It's almost like a killjoy, in that moment, to say to someone, no, I didn't get an injury. I just wasn't good enough. But you just don't often hear that story, yet the reality is that 95% of professional footballers, that's the truth, that they became professional footballers. It wasn't that they got an injury. They just weren't good enough in the end to be able to continue. And so, learning that God loves me unconditionally has given me the freedom to be able to answer that question honestly and say, football was great.
Yeah.
Football was brilliant, and I wouldn't change it for the world, but I didn't get injured. I just wasn't good enough. And now I'm doing something else, and I'm really proud of this. And even though you might not be as proud of me, as you would be if I was a professional footballer, I know that God is. Some of the words that are in the Bible, I'm a father at the moment. I am a father. And the words in the Bible where Jesus speaks and he says, my son, and he says it a number of times, and those words have meant an awful lot to me, because when I look at my son, the feelings that I have for him mean that he does not need to do anything in order to make me pleased and make me happy and make me proud. And the more I have dwelt on those words, that God looks at me and the first thing he says is my son. And after that, everything else that I feel like I'm doing for God is almost irrelevant to the fact that he is my father and he sees me as his son. I actually think, had I known it when I was a professional footballer, I think I would have been a better footballer. I think I would have played with a lot more freedom. When I was a professional footballer, I felt like everything was a risk. If I play with freedom, it's a risk. The risk because what if it goes wrong and I get subbed, or what if I get taken off? Everything was a risk, and the more you learn about how unconditionally God loves you, less and less of your actions become a risk. It just becomes you acting out of freedom, acting with a whole lot more joy. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is Romans 8:29, which says that God is changing me into the likeness of Jesus, so that he will be the firstborn among many brothers. And for me, the reason why I like the verse is because it says that God is continually changing me into the likeness of Jesus. And when I reflect on what my life has been like and what my life is going to be like in the future, on earth, I'm aware of the fact that God is changing me into the likeness of Jesus. And so there will be ups and there will be downs, and there will be things that are unexpected, and there will probably be disappointments. But when I know that my Father has a plan, and that plan is to change me into the likeness of Jesus, that I can have a lot more assurance and peace, knowing that he is in control, that he loves me unconditionally, and therefore I am free.
Yeah, that's so true. It's amazing. And I mean, that's just an inspiring point to finish on, really, because it's something we all need to know. It's something we all need deeper revelation of, I think. And, such a powerful example that you've got in your own life. And, Mike, it's just, I'd love to talk to you loads more, but I'm aware of time. But it's been fascinating hearing your story today and hearing a bit more of your take on this, coming from that kind of performance world and learning that freedom and that joy of just being who you are in God. So thank you so much for giving up your time and talking with us today. And it's just been a pleasure to have you on the story.
It's been great to be here. Thank you.
No problem. Just to say to anyone who's listening today, you may not have had a professional football career, but if Mike's story has resonated with you today in any way, if what he's talking about around knowing freedom and who you are in Jesus resonates, knowing more of the Father's love for you, then I know Mike would be happy to talk to you one-on-one or connect. So, if you want to hear more or reach out to him personally, you can connect with us at Crowd Church through the website and drop us an email or a message on the website and we can put you in touch. I'm sure he'd be happy to share more of his story with anyone who's interested. So thanks again for being here today, Mike. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. And thank you also to you listeners for being here and listening in. That's all from us right now. And we will see you again soon. Have a great week, everyone.
And just like that, we have reached the end of another fascinating conversation. Now remember to check out Crowd Church at www.crowd.church, even if you might not see the point of church. You see, we are a digital church on a quest to discover how Jesus can help us live a more meaningful life. We are a community, a space to explore the Christian faith, and a place where you can contribute and grow. And you are welcome at Crowd Church. Don't forget to subscribe to the What's the Story podcast on your favorite podcast app, because we've got a treasure trove of inspiring stories coming your way, and we would basically hate for you to miss any of them. And just in case no one has told you yet today, remember, you are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. What's the Story is a production of Crowd Church. Our fantastic team, including Anna Kettle, Sadaf Bainon, and me, Matt Edmondson, and Tanya Hutzalak, work behind the scenes tirelessly to bring you all these fabulous stories. Our theme song is a creative work of Josh Edmondson. And if you're interested in the transcript or show notes, head over to our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com. And whilst you're there, sign up for our free weekly newsletter to get all of this goodness delivered straight to your inbox. So that's it from all of us this week here at What's the Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. We'll catch you next time. Bye for now.